when people started saying, oh, people resist change, people don't like change, I'm like, it's a bunch of baloney. Obviously, we have advertisers all the time saying new. Oh, wow, like how exciting. Look at our new model. Look at this new version. And we're very excited by all that. So I'm with you. I also agree with you about change oftentimes suggests that we are leaving something behind. And what a great conversation that is.
The question is, can organization change internally? Do company mostly retrieve to the system they were built on? Paul, would you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, man. My name is Paul Mastrangelo. I am an organizational psychologist and founder of the company First Domino Consulting. First Domino Consulting operates between employee listening systems, leadership development, and organizational change. And as we talk more about this, you're going to hear about something I call infectious change design. I think it's near and dear to your heart, Van, as we've been talking, right? So designing a system that leads you to the outcome that you want, the change that you're trying to get to. I spent about, 25 years in employee listening. I taught in academia for about 9 years. I live in the United States, in the smallest of states, the state of Rhode Island, which is where I call home, live with my wife, and our 4 kids are adults now. So they're sometimes with us, sometimes not. That's me
Awesome.
in a nutshell.
Thank you. All right. The first part. The business model sets the initiatives, limits, and trade-offs inside of the organization. What people call the culture may often be behavioral output of that model. Okay, the question, I will set 2 questions so you can answer them the way you want. When leaders describe the culture problem, how often they're actually describing the business model problem? That's where the problems will be coming from. Business promote behaviors, we know that. How can we trace employees' behavior back to what the organization financial model is?
Yeah. Let's define our terms a little bit. And you might disagree with me, so feel free to jump in. But to me, the business model, ultimately, an organization is there to survive, and survival is based on financial metrics. So they've got to make money. And of course, some organizations are nonprofit, blah, blah, blah. But most of the companies we're talking about, they're trying to make money. And so that's the name of the game. And you and I, we've been preparing for this recording for a while now. And so we've had great conversations about this. I think a lot of times there's an illusion, is my takeaway, about, oh no, we're like family here and we care about you and people are the most important thing. And I think what my interpretation of our conversations is you're saying the business model is not that. People are not the most important thing. Profit is the most important thing. And everything else that they're saying, if that contradicts that, is a bit of an illusion. All right, so let's work backwards from that to culture. And I've been thinking about this the past few days. There are terms that come out of academia, out of research, that are great terms and well researched, and they make a lot of sense. And they then move into the business world and they move into media and social media, and the term gets redefined or drifts from its original purpose. Culture is a great example of this. So to me, culture, how it should be defined, how it was originally considered, is it's like shared habits. The way that people are doing things gets formed as soon as the 2 of us, 3 of us, 5 of us, 500, whatever, as we start working together, we're going to form some habits. And some of it at first is going to be conscious and spoken to. Oh, you know what? It turns out we can't do it. All right, let's not do that anymore. We're not going to use that approach. After a while, of course, that's either written down formally, sometimes that happens, or it's never written down, but we're remembering it. And new people come in and they start saying, all right, we can't do that. Those are values. Now, note, that's not the same thing as how leaders talk about cultures in a formal or I don't know, modern approach, right? So people say, oh, I'm the CEO and I worked with my team and we've been working on this for 6 months. And now here are our 6 values. And so I talk to them about their culture. They say, oh, yeah, we have a culture. It's these 6 values. Here they are: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those aren't values, those are wishes, but they're not values. Values are, let's go back to us. We're working together, we're building this team. And we realize, I don't know, customer service can get us in trouble. We have over focused on customers, and now that profit's declining. So there's the business model. So over time, we realize, look, we have to limit our customization. We can't go too far. So are customers important? Absolutely, but only to a point. Oh, okay. So what do we value? We value profit. We want to do good by our customers so they stay our customers, but we're not really going to bend over backwards at the cost of. And to me, that's a value. A value is, what am I willing to sacrifice to actually maintain this particular value that we say we're trusting in? So I don't even know if I've answered your question. I feel like I've just set up your question.
Right.
So you're saying, what's the connection between culture and the business model?
Yes.
I think the way it should work. So this is just Paul Mastrangelo talks about if he were king of the world. I think leaders need to be transparent. I think it's okay to say, hey, we got to make money. I'm sorry. Sometimes it's a dirty game. We're going to try not to be dirty. Here are some things we're not going to do. Yeah, I saw your facial reaction, man. Here are some things that we want to accomplish this. And here are the parameters. We're going to do it by not doing this and not doing that, et cetera. Now, let me be positive about this. Bear with me. I was reading something about how the more constraints that you have, the more creative you get. And
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
the thing that comes to my mind immediately is poetry. Poetry is all about, we have to have a certain number of syllables. There's a certain, what is it, like iambic pentameter, right? The certain rhythm. I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. And Shakespeare wrote that way, and et cetera. So he set up these rules, Shakespeare did, and it's like, I can't violate that. And that seems very restrictive. And yet, obviously, he wrote some brilliant things that introduce words and terms and phrases that are still with us hundreds of years later. So, to me, if you say, look, this is the way we're going to be a company, this is our purpose, this is what we're going to do, and here's the way we're going to do it. But it can't be done the way, again, this is what I meant by culture gets sidetracked. It doesn't work the way, like, oh, I've come down from the mountain as the CEO with these values. No, we've got to design a behavior system, a social system that corresponds with what that purpose is. We make widgets, and the widgets make us money, but this is the way we're going to make. Here's our competitive advantage, how we do things differently. Here's the way we treat our people to make sure that we're not just burning you out. We don't want to be that kind of company. I think it's possible. It's just rare. And getting there, it's one thing to say, I recognize that I want to be that type of leader in this type of organization. And of course, how to get there. I think my field, org psychology, organizational development, we haven't done a good job of really explaining that to leaders, how you get there.
I think you actually answering partially a few other questions that I have here for you. And when talks about creativity and restraints, I think there's no creativity without that, right? So it is, even when there's no restraints, the creativity always find restraints. Otherwise, there's no creative brief whatsoever, right? So there's no purpose to it. So let me dive in. I think let's talk about this question. So culture is not a free coffee. Value poster, which you describe, which I love, how people really believe that's going to work, or leadership language, right? It is a social system shaped by compliance, identity, and share expectations, right? So the question for you, sir, is a culture an outcome of business model, or does it has a power as its own internal system? Can it grow that? Does it have a chance to be that way? Or it's really driven just by what we already discussed, business model? What do leaders usually misunderstand when they trying to change the culture? I think also what I will say, let's just talk about definition of what the culture is, right? I think that's what this is all about.
So fundamentally, your question is, I think, where does this culture come from? What is it an offshoot of? And again, how does it connect or disconnect from that business model? I agree with what you said. An organization is a social system. It has a purpose, and many social systems do, because why do you get together? Like, why do you go to your pub? You like to get together, you like to eat out, you like to have some drinks, and there's something about this place that you like, the location, whatever. So even that, strange of an example that just came out of my brain, as that is, it's a purpose. And so an organization has a purpose. We want to work, we're trying to get something done, I've got to feed my family, but yet I want to do it feeling good about something, and here's the way it goes. But there's so many other things that factor in. Gosh, so I guess I'll give you the answer, and then maybe we can break it down. I think the culture can easily get misaligned with the purpose for a variety of reasons, in no particular order. Sometimes leaders, particularly these days, they like to measure everything. There's the belief that what gets measured gets done. And so everything gets measured. And so there are dashboards everywhere, right? Dashboards abound. And we start, I think people, once we're given numbers and we're saying, okay, Van, you're responsible for this number, will naturally say, okay, I know what to do. And you lose track of what the number represents. So we were talking before we hit the record button about Meta and how they're monitoring keystrokes and what employees are doing. And that led to an online conversation about performance monitoring. And of course, when I typed in my response, it's like performance in quotes. That makes the assumption that keystrokes are performance. And that's what I'm talking about. So there's a metric, Paul, you've got to make sure your team is performing, and performance of keystrokes. It's ridiculous. Obviously, if you're coding some software, I want you to stop typing. I want you to stare at the screen and go, there's got to be a way around this problem. And if that takes you 20 minutes, an hour, 5 days, you're thinking about something, and then you're going to start typing, and away we go. Nope, that's not performance. According to the metric says hitting the keys, right? So you can see how I don't want to, I'm not coming down as someone who's in favor of this, but you can see how there was a thought. We really should try to promote performance. Oh, yeah, that's true. We should measure performance, because if you measure something, then we'll know. So far, I'm in agreement, but then somehow it goes awry. But no, we should monitor everyone's keystrokes. Well, that's not performance. And how will that make the people feel? And what does that actually, what does that do for motivation, and et cetera? And so suddenly the culture and what we're trying to do here start to split off. And yeah, I can't quite understand why that occurs. I know people are smart. Business leaders are not dumb people, but I think we get microvisioned. We're analyzing, and we lose, and tunnel vision, right? We're losing the big picture. And back to your point, at the end of the day, the thing that gets rewarded is the thing that really guides the system. And so we don't care how Paul feels. We just want Paul to produce stuff for us so we make money.
Yeah, the measurements and principles or initiatives and incentives for the measurements are determined by the organizations, right? And it's a simple statement: leaders are humans, and what is a percent of the things that we measure? They're not really measurable, or we sometimes focus on wrong things, and we measure the wrong things, the insights and data collection and all these things. I don't really want to question these. There's so much literature on these written. So I think that's what you're talking about, measurement. That's how they can be really helpful, and how they're falling short at the same time, just because they're all run by humans, and we determine what to measure and what not, and we very often make mistakes. I want to ask again, we honing in pretty much the similar territories. So resistance often gets framed as irrational or negative, but it may reveals unconcern, identity threat, bad timing, or lack of trust. What are the most common reasons employees resist change that leaders fail to see? We already have that answer. And the second one, how would change work differently if resistance were treated as a useful information? It's interesting aspect of the question, right?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't like the word resistance. You're right. It has a connotation that the problem is in the person who should be doing what I want them to do. So I'm trying to create an organizational change, good, bad, or indifferent, and someone's not going along with it. And that means they have the problem, which is ridiculous. So to your point, understanding why do they have that problem is a feedback mechanism. My personal belief is that people are mostly logical, a little bit of emotion because we're human, but for the most part, we resist changes that are forced upon us. We don't like that. If I say, look, I got a problem, Van, here's what it is. I want to work with you to find the solution of what we can do about it. That's a great conversation. If I say, I've got this problem, Van, and here's what I'm telling you you have to do about it, that doesn't feel quite as nice. Even if you like me, even if everything about this is reasonable, there's a little bit of you that says, who's he? Who's this guy, Paul? Paul doesn't know the details that I do.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. And so that's one aspect. Another aspect is, which I think is less, not really considered as the way I should frame that as much, it's our identity. You're saying to me, hey, we have a safety issue. And Paul, you've got to start wearing this helmet and put on this protective gear. Now, that's logical and that makes sense. And in theory, I should be all for it. But there's an identity thing here. I've been working here for 10 years, and the only people who wear their hat and their best, those are the rookies, the new people. So when these new people come, that's what we do because what do they know? So what you're asking me to do is to give up my status
Yeah.
and to give up the power, that social power that I have, and ignore the informal process, the culture, the informal way that we acculturate on the team. I don't know if you've ever spoken with firefighters, and that may vary from country to country, but my experience with my brother-in-law and my nephew are firefighters. Oh my gosh, I don't want to call it hazing, that's a little strong, but there's a process that the new folks go through. Why? Because we need to trust them. And so we got to run them through some crap and treat them a little bit like dirt just to make sure that they understand. But once they understand that we're doing it with a wink, oh, oh, I see. I'm a part of the team. And this is the way we do things here. It goes better. So if someone has this organizational change from 2, 3, 4 levels higher, it doesn't understand that social system and that identity, that's problematic as well. And there's other reasons for resistance too. You're telling me that you want me to do this, but you're giving me none of the tools, systems, time to actually get it done. So you're saying it's got to be done. Boom. I expect the light switch. You told me to do it. Now do it. And I'm thinking that's not the way it works. I need to ramp up. I need some preparation. And that's not a conversation that a lot of leaders are having. So this urgency over preparation, social identity, and coercion. I think that's what creates resistance.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. I just want to throw in another question. What is the role of the HR in this equation? It's because we're talking about, it's pretty much, it fits in very well, right? HR role is to basically protect the system and make people fit in so that we all play nice or produce the work that is needed, however you want to define it, right? What role of the HR is.
Yeah. Okay. Let me put it this way. A couple things come to mind. First of all, right at the start of our conversation, you had talked about systems that are in place that are really designed to keep us acting consistently. An organization's rules, policies, and even the culture, they're designed to have us being consistent. And of course, what everyone talks about and we start to recognize is consistency is not the problem. If there was no need to change, we wouldn't even need leaders. Everyone would just keep doing what they're doing. But that's not the case. There are changes, and those changes are hitting us in the 21st century faster and faster than ever before. So it's not just HR, right? But every function is built on consistency, and yet agility and the ability to change is really the valuable piece. Okay. So let me talk about my work a little bit because I do a lot of work with folks in human resources, and we're talking about how do we introduce behavioral change. So I usually talk about the HR person and then the leader, the person who is either in charge of the organization or the unit or whatever
Okay.
oversees this particular desired outcome. To me, I want to think about someone from human resources as being a change facilitator. And I want to think about the leader as being the person who's, if I boil this down, responsible for two things. One, what's our purpose? What are we trying to accomplish? I work a lot with employee survey data. That could be fuzzy. There's a lot of scores saying, oh, look, we need to be more innovative, or we need to value people more. So, what does that mean? Innovation, it's about coming up with a new design. Okay, what does that mean? And the more specific we get,
Yeah.
that helps us. That helps the leader in terms of his communication or her communication, articulating what that is, and it keeps us from drifting, right? So I think you mean one thing, someone else thinks you mean something else, and bad things happen. So a leader definitely needs to say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. The second thing is a compilation of many things. So this is the majority of what I start talking with leaders about, but I can boil it down to I need to not only get out of the way, I need to create a social system for the right group of people to help me understand how we're going to achieve that goal. And if I involve other people, so if I ask employees, hey, who should I be working with to make us, quote, more innovative? And hopefully I've got a better goal in mind to decrease our development time by 20% in the next year or something like that. Who should I be working with? And now all the employees are saying, you need to talk with Van or Paul. He's a son of a gun. You got to talk. And now all these people are saying, these are folks we respect. They're knowledgeable and they know something, and you need to involve them. Let's say as a leader, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to not tell you what I think should be done. I'm not even going to tell you what people I want to work with. You're telling me. And now they're going to start to give me inputs. And we're going to start to come up not with one set of stone tablets coming down the mountain like it's Moses, right? No, we're not going to do that. We're going to try some things in iterative fashion. So some small, I call them paper airplanes or action prototypes. Let's try something, see if it works. It's design thinking. It's what I know you know well. Leaders don't always think about that though, because they don't like to fail. They want something out of the box that's going to work. And what I'm saying is, no, what if we don't do it that way? What if we try something? Because now the more we poke at the system, we're going to learn how the system reacts. And that's helpful for us. So bit by bit, this team can be working on that change. We can then, because the employees created that team, they can go back and they can say, you know what? Let me tell you, Van, why what we thought before I joined the team, we thought it was this. It's not. Oh my gosh, we had a very narrow view of the problem. What I'm now seeing and working with these other folks is this. Let's give it a shot. And you tell me, right? So you may not feel comfortable going to our CEO or the head of our unit, but you nominated me. So I know you're going to talk with me. So here we are at lunch going, Paul, that change you guys created, it works 80% of the time. But boy, when it doesn't work, oh God, that's a problem. Tell me more. And now I'm bringing that back, right? And we can start to showcase this process. Hey, everyone, look at how this leader is working with a team of people, trying things out, and look at the progress that we've made. And you can even look at our failures if you want, but the point is we're trying things and we're getting there.
Yeah.
And now imagine managers. So the supervisor saying, hey, I understand what we're trying to achieve. And when you say, so here's a classic example, you're my boss. Boss, I don't understand it. Like, how are we supposed to do this? Where's the time? Can you give me a better explanation of this? Tell me about this. I don't get it. I don't understand. And now
Yeah.
you may say, Paul is resisting. Paul's being such a jerk. He's so disengaged. That's not what Paul is thinking. Paul is thinking, I'm totally committed to doing this. I have so many questions because I'm trying to make it mine. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do it within
Yeah.
this system. How do I make it work? So we need to make sure that you understand that's a mindset shift. Oh, Paul's not a jerk. Paul's actually going through this transformation over to where I want. and I got to give them the right help. So you asked, how does HR, all of that? I need HR to know all of those steps to say, look, this is how change is going to occur. And this leader has the authority to do it. So I need you, HR, to be a coach, to be a feedback system for this leader. And what I try to do is I try to help the two of them get through that. That is not a role that everyone in human resources is used to. And of course, leaders, that's not a role that they're used to. Leaders are usually
No.
designed to tell people what to do. They're not as comfortable asking people and trying things, right? So that's my answer to how change should happen, and the very uncomfortable and new process that I'm asking human resources and a leadership team to go through.
It seems to me that this is common knowledge almost, that we are biased that favor I frame, right? Individual frame, where we find the issues and the problems sitting in the people, and in this case, employees, which is it's a questionable, right? Because the behavior is really coming from the system. They're promoted by the system. And this is probably my favorite part that I'm going to ask you. It's a new versus change, right? People often love new but hate change. I really want to discuss with you this. New feels like a possibility, change feel like a loss, right?
Yeah.
So it is something that I really want to address. That distinction can reshape how organization introduce the transformation, if there's anything like that. So the questions are, why does new feels psychologically different from change, even when it's both altered behaviors, which is difficult to achieve, right? One feels really light and progressive and motivating, while the second one is like really feels like a heavy task. How does the leaders introduce new behavior adoption without triggering loss aversion? This is literally will answer my curiosity.
Another one of those questions, Paul, cancer. Can you solve that in 5 minutes? So it's a great question. And I've said this to you privately, and I'll say it here. I love the name of the podcast, New Changes Everything. And you are right. I noted the same thing many years ago when people started saying, oh, people resist change. People don't like change. I'm like, it's a bunch of baloney. Obviously, we have advertisers all the time saying new. Oh, wow, like how exciting. Look at our new model. Look at this new version. And we're very excited by all that. So I'm with you. I also agree with you about change oftentimes suggests that we are leaving something behind. And what a great conversation that is. What are you sad about? What are the things that you don't want to leave behind? And is there a way to take some of that with us on the journey to the new path? Or is there a way to fulfill that old value? I'm going to use that term intentionally. It's truly valued and valuable, not because of a poster, because no, I valued it, right? So, what is it about this value that maybe could transform? It's not about traveling to our customers anymore and having lunch with them, and you valued that. What if there's something that we still value our customers, but now it's going to be done differently? How? At least now we're asking the question, and you're bringing me along for the journey. How can I can't do it unless I'm traveling to our customers? That can't be true. Do you know for sure that your customers only value that? I'm sure they love when you take them out to lunch, but what if there's another way? Now, and so that's, I think, the first answer, or the first part of the answer to your question. I think there's a difference between, as I said, being told and versus being asked to join. So we, as human beings, we do like to control our own world or part of the world, right? So we like having some control. And if we can't have control, we would like some predictability. And to me, that's where you have to start. It's
Yep.
recognizing that emotional connection about the loss. What the research says, there's some great research. It's a horrible name for the theory. It's called the trans-theoretical model of change. It comes out of health and counseling psychology. But the idea is, and I'm really boiling this down, there are pros and there are cons. Or if you like to use something different, there's an approach and an avoidance. So you come to me and say, there's going to be a change. part of me, like you were saying about new, is exciting. Oh, oh, that could be really interesting. I see your vision. Wow, that could save me time. That could make us very profitable. And of course, I want job security. Yeah, I want to run right towards that. And then the cons, right? The avoidance. Wait a minute. I don't understand because of my identity, because of how the time you're giving me, the enablement, right? And the fact that this we're forced into it. Suddenly our competition did this, and now, damn it, we've got to do it. And I don't want to do it. Right. So that approach avoidance to me. So literally the approach needs to be greater than the avoidance. That's what it boils down to. Now, how do you help me along that transformation? The first thing you want to do is to emphasize some of the new. Paul, there are some advantages here. Let me point them out. There's this, there's that new. But you also need to have a conversation with me. Now, tell me what's on your mind about the disadvantages. And so maybe we start talking about there's this, there's that, this other. Okay. Now, what we've got to do is to make the importance of the pros, the approach, the attraction, we've got to make that more important than the negative, the cons, the avoidance. And the best way to do that, initially we talk about the pro, but then we talk about what can I do to lessen the blow, to lessen that loss that we're going to have? What would make that work for you? And I might be distraught, not thinking well. I might not be articulate. I might be resisting, right? I don't want to have the conversation. Okay. But if you keep coming at me and saying, no, Paul, seriously, give me something. What might work? All right. You know what? I don't know if it's going to work, but here's an idea. Remember 2 years ago, blah, blah, blah. If we did something like that. Now, you're clever because you learned about infectious change from Paul Mastrangelo. And you say to yourself, all right, you know what, Paul? I like your idea. Let's try it out. In fact, do you mind if we share your idea? Hey, yeah, that's fine with me. So now I'm going from being the person who's very negative about change, and everyone knows I'm the negative. But now we've done something clever. Paul, you have a great idea. Let's put together a little PowerPoint together about how managers would do it, and we'll post it internally. So now all of a sudden, there's my name on our Slack channel or whatever your internal messaging system is. And I'm now identified as someone who's got an idea for change. And you didn't force me to do it. Well, you didn't say, Paul, but I chose to do it. And now all of a sudden, people are coming up to me. What's that about? Oh, look, they asked me what I thought would work, and I think this will work. I'm going to give it a shot. You have changed internally how I'm identifying, because I went from saying, no, I'm not going to be on board with this, but you asked me, you're listening to me, and you publicly displayed it. And now, and of course, you give me a support system around that, right? Hey, Paul, good job. Do you need anything? Well, there's been a transference at the individual level. And if I'm an important person, people pay attention to me. Guess what? I'm going to bring them on board as well.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. This is just more evidence about the theory, how to make change, if you really need to change, if that's really what is needed. And last, it's a little bit more tactical question, and I'm very curious about what do you think? And it is what I will actually say that would be the title of this episode, is the willingness to change, right? Is how ready we are to really embrace the change, how to really get there. So big transformation often fail because it attacks the core system directly, right? Let's not do that. The better route may be smaller satellite interventions, right? Without
Yes.
calling them nudges. That's not what I'm talking about, right? So we're talking about modeling and designing something that is much larger than tactical nudges, right? So better route might be smaller satellite intervention that create independent proof and motivation and momentum to adapt by the system. Okay, so it's quite different conceptually from nudges. How do we design for the system change? What do you say? Are we still talking about your psychology? So I really want to hear how you think about that, right? What would be successful first domino look like inside of the organization, right? So highlighting the conceptually highlighting your organization, your company's name, right?
Yep, that whole, and you're right, and thanks for pointing that out, right? First Domino Consulting was the idea that if I can knock over that first domino, everything else takes care of itself. But of course, that doesn't just happen. You've got to lay out all the dominoes. So you've got to figure, what's the last domino doing? Is it ringing a bell? Is it making the duck tip over into the water? Whatever that fancy domino pattern that maybe you've seen on the internet looks like, I've got to figure out what the outcome is and then work backwards from there.
Yeah.
And of course, the dominoes are the people, right? And so on. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Let me make sure that people are thinking about this correctly. I think when you read books on change in business literature, the idea is that there is a leader who is going to drive change, and basically employees' job is to follow, and they need to buy in. Burning platform. You've got to drink the Kool-Aid. Just as an aside, I hate those analogies. A burning platform, someone has got a choice between dying by flame or dying by ice cold water. Drinking the Kool-Aid comes from that Jonestown horrible situation, people with cyanide laced drinks. It's so horrible, horrible. And why would you want to equate your organizational change to mass suicide or a horrible situation where people are dying? Anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked there. Instead of having a leader basically try to impose change, what we're talking about, and you said this, is how can we create the system that guides us towards the outcome I want? And you're right, nudge, the concept of behavioral nudges is another concept that started out interesting. It morphed. Suddenly reminders are equivalent with nudges, and reminders aren't quite the same thing as originally what a nudge was designed to be. And of course, like everything, people want to apply it everywhere. Look, I've got a hammer and I'm going to break the wood with the hammer and I'm going to glue things with a hammer, right? It doesn't work that way. It's just one tool. However, I'd say that there are all sorts of things that are baked into what I try to do. One of them I mentioned, by having a peer nominated team, you're involving a lot of people, and the people who are nominated are almost like network leaders or emergent leaders. They may not be formally leaders, and they may not have authority, but yet people will follow them.
Yeah.
And so that's a key distinction. So by leveraging those, instead of me working against those folks, I'm bringing them onto my team. So right, so that's a social nudge, quote unquote, or a design change. Another thing that I'd like to do, and I'll talk about this in communications, this is so basic, I feel embarrassed to talk about it, but people are anchored by numbers. Again, I'll work with employee listening. And so a lot of times I'll work with an HR person and they'll say, oh, we should start out by saying how 85% of the organization took the survey. And we want to continue that. We want to make sure that they feel that they can speak openly and give us ideas, et cetera. And I'm thinking, okay, that's nice. But what we really should say is 722 people. Now that's whatever I said, 83%, 722 people, or I'm losing track of my own example. 722 people took this survey. Now that's a big number. And now people are going to say, wow, that's a lot. I thought the survey was a bunch of hooey and no one really cared about it. But now I'm hearing that number, that so many people are participating. And of course, now I'm going to lean into a peer support, because no matter what I think about the CEO or the company, if we're working together, I tend to like you. You're one of us. You're in the trenches with me, right? So now we're going to position this as, hey, the reason that 722 people took this survey is because they had a belief that we could do better. And we want to support that. So not only do we want you to speak up, we're going to listen to you, we're going to try some things, and we're going to give you feedback on that process. These are all crowdsourcing ideas. They're sales. They're coming from the way addictions are treated, right? So if I can separate you from the crowd that is all negative and bring you to an offsite and work with you, there are ways that I can use all of these subtle influencers. That's the term I like to use. These are subtle influencers, and leaders are shockingly not aware of these things. So that can be very eye-opening. There's a great book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. It tends to be geared towards sales, but if you take the principles there, you could easily
Yep.
see how, oh, yeah, I could see how I can apply this to organizational change.
Cool. So, and last question is, do you have any question for me?
Yes, sir, I do. And I feel quite horrible that I'm springing this on you. But so I feel like it was a couple months ago, Van, that you and I introduced ourselves to each other and we started talking. And they've been great conversations. So I want to thank you again for that. But you introduced this concept of a system. You introduced me to the book, It's On You, which I was reading as much as I could because I was frustrating to read. And so I started thinking, wow, Van has a certain view that we are very much, I'm going to use the word controlled, maybe influenced is a little bit less strong, by systems that are out there. And I started wondering, gosh, is Van a really negative guy? Is he like, and you don't seem to be at all. And the name of your podcast is so positive, right? New changes everything. So that's my question. Given the way things, now that you're seeing a systemic way that the world operates, and you know how that can be working against individuals, how do you, A, maintain your own positivity and optimism? And B, how do you work with others? How do you say, okay, given this, here's what you, John or Jane, here's what you can do in a positive way that helps build them up? What's the way that you handle that?
So the question is, how does system influence, how do I think about system, and where do I place it in I will say in my practice, and how do I manage it personally?
Yeah.
So I'm not a negative person. I'm not socialist per se, but there is a plenty of evidence and literature that we are living in society, and there's a social norms that we follow, and without those we can't properly be planted in the system. So the system really does drives the what we call the culture or behaviors. So I can't even talk about these. I wouldn't question that, right? I wouldn't question that because there's a plenty of evidence of that, and it's more than evident that is a truth that how we frame our behaviors and realities is based on a system, right? On the other side, it's like, how can we live inside of a system? How can we be happy? And I think systems are made of the people, and businesses are made of the people, and people are those who writing the systems. So I think that is one way of answering it. And what you and I spoke already, it is understanding that we are capable of changing our systems with understanding how it's all constructed. So if we know the mechanics of how the systems are constructed and science behind it, it's probably going to be much easier to change that, or change it or influence it if change is really needed. But also we can focus on the new things that are much easier to adapt to. So it comes to what I'm trying to say to many for a really long time now. I'm talking about some sorts of consciousness. Everybody have a choice for their own consciousness and for level they're going to arrive to in sense of system and businesses. I would call these business consciousness. I think that's where we're going. I think we finally will arrive, hopefully sooner or later, and be being pushed to that part of our strength more than anything before with the accelerated technology and geopolitical changes that are happening right now. So I hope answering your question.
What I'm reminded of when I listen to your response, the definition of an expert that I like using is someone who knows when to break the rules. And so, in a way, what you're saying is, look, I want people to know the rules. Here's the way systems affect us. That's the rules. Know that. And now we can figure out how to break those rules. How do we change the system? And of course, I think individuals in the machine, we sometimes forget how much power we have. That if we stopped obeying traffic laws, if stop signs don't matter and red lights don't matter and et cetera, then there'd be chaos. And the only reason that the system works is because we allow it. And so I like what you're saying. And so that awareness, that consciousness of what our power is and how we can apply it. That's a great answer. I love that.
Thank you. And thank you for all your time and that we spent preparing and working on this. Thank you so much.
It has been helpful for me. So right back at you, man. Right back at you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.